So, hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are today. We are saying you hi from Nuremberg, and we are welcoming you to our fourth day of the Dynamics Week 2023. It is our annual event, full of sessions all around topics about Dynamics 365. Project operations, in this case, was our great topic this week, and we still have a couple of to share with you. And yes, today talking more about project operations, and we have a very special guest today with us, Sameer Verma. He is a Chief Product Officer for Dynamics 365 products, and I believe that he has prepared a lot of interesting information for us. And yes, Sameer, now to you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well online and obviously in the room. So just a quick introduction. My name is Sameer Verma. I've been with Microsoft for about 2.5 years now. Prior to Microsoft, I was with SAP for about 21 years. So that's why I live in a little village called Waldorf, which not too many people know. Um, so I had an interesting drive to Nuremberg today morning. I was toying between taking the train and driving. I decided to drive because taking the train would have been a 50-50 chance if I made it. And since I was in Oslo yesterday, I did not want to come directly at night and be here. So I'm here. I'm hoping that by 2070, our Deutsche Bahn will be on time somehow. So at Microsoft, what do I do? I started my journey actually 2.5 years ago in the supply chain space. So I was GM for our supply chain portfolio. In September this year, we decided really to bring our portfolio of finance, supply chain, commerce, project operations, and HR together into a singular org. And that's our basically the broad ERP offering. And I'm the chief product officer there and the growth lead. So I'm the only one in Germany, actually. My entire team sits mainly in Copenhagen. Dublin is another place where we're expanding pretty broadly. Of course, Redmond, China, and Bangalore, and also a couple of other locations in India. So that's the spread. That's my responsibility. Today, I'm going to talk about the broader Microsoft story and then eventually pivot to project operations. So I forgot my clicker, so I'm going to click from here. Now, I think the interesting thing is majority of the people sitting in this room, except the Gen Z, you probably have seen most of these revolutions in your lifetime, right? So the PC revolution, the Windows era, the explosion of internet, digital conversions of physical goods, digital services, and probably the amount of computing that we carry in our back pockets today, right? This has been a pretty massive journey. I've left mobile because mobile is also something part of the digital convergence that happened. The reality is that we've been very, very fortunate to see a lot of revolutions in our lifetimes. Of course, for kids born in the late 80s or 90s, it's a different situation. But all of these revolutions have taken some time to reach a crescendo. What has been very different about generative AI is that the world between February 2023 and now looks pretty dramatically different. And it's also very real, right? So it's not like blockchain, etc., where we theoretically admired the whole thing but never really got to experience it. That's the difference here. The other aspect is like the reason it is very transformative is it is really changing the way we work. It is really about changing the relationship between you and software. It's not really making the software dumb or stupid. There's a very powerful reasoning engine that sits behind. But the whole interaction there, how you communicate with your software, dramatically changes. And this is, in fact, one of the biggest drivers for adoption. Google search became very popular simply because you didn't need to know anything. You just type whatever you felt. Of course, there are people who can search well, and then there are people who can't search well. So this whole prompt training, etc., is going to be the big thing. But the reality is, whether it's your grandmother or your grandchild, everybody can equally, with so much ease, communicate. And this is very, very transformational. Now, The reality is also that this is not going to impact just the tech industry. This is going to impact everything from business models, different, products and services. I'm sure you've seen it from Microsoft around Service Cloud, Service Copilot or Sales Copilot. So things like people who are sitting in contact centers, call centers, it is going to be a dramatic improvement for them. At the same time, there's also massive change on how companies do their operations, right? So it is not going to really leave anybody untouched. The question is, who onboards faster? There's obviously a lot of skepticism about any new technology when it comes to privacy, security, trust, ability to trust in the outcomes it produces. But the fact is that it's happening. It's already happening today as we speak. If you look at retail and CPG industry, this company Fashionable, which really does AI generated designs, which used to have a lead time of, sometimes between months to years, between one season to next. This is a matter of hours that they can generate new designs. And they collaborate with Boudica, which basically produces synthetic models to try this out. So if anybody is considering a career in modeling, probably this is not the right time to go there. So it's actually very real. And these are things which are not in preview or stuff. This is happening today. Similarly, PwC, it partners with Harvey AI, which basically has this whole generative AI readers to look at all the past documents, generate insights. It's all sitting on their data. It's not that, they have to get data from somewhere else, but they're just applying the models on this existing data, for which they used to hire a lot of paralegals or junior, legal workforce, and they're just getting this on the fly, a contextual to the cases that they are in. So these are big differences, big changes happening across the industry. So when we look at it from a perspective of, this is like really the next generation of the new wave of productivity that is being unleashed. And that's why, I think it's important to understand what is the meaning of Copilot here from our perspective. It is really about augmenting humans. It is not autopilot. It is not about replacing humans. It is really about, helping you do things much faster. I'm sure some of us have noticed, all these autocomplete, etc. in Outlook or even on phones. It helps you save a lot of time. If you look at it cumulatively, there's going to be a massive impact when you think about these things landing in PowerPoints, Excels, etc. So there is a productivity growth. There's, like I talked about, this skepticism of people fearing it will take jobs away, etc. Certain jobs it will transform. I mean, I wasn't there when Industrial Revolution started, but whatever we are doing is at the back of that Industrial Revolution that started, and it generated a lot more jobs. So in near term, the belief is that it's going to add at least 10% to the global GDP, which is approximately 10 trillion of additional services and work that will come through that. So I say there's nothing to fear here. So when we talk about this, boring, unsexy world of ERP, which, probably nobody wants to see, how is that going to change, right? So the reality is that ERP is actually the breeding ground for capabilities that you can bring with Copilot. So between the 90s, early 90s, when SAP, BAN, they started with inventory management, MRP, financials, etc. It was very targeted things, right? You had these massive mainframe machines, punch cards. This is how the world worked. Between 90 and 2000, in these decades, the main change was the client server technology. Things started becoming a little bit more process oriented. By the way, we still follow those processes. There was a business model around, license, you paid license, maintenance, you sold to the IT, the business user typically had no say in what software to use. So it was mainly that, people had to work around software. The companies had to work around software than the other way around. In 2000s was when the seeding of cloud started. Companies like Salesforce, Workday, SuccessFactors, many of them who don't exist independently, started, leaving the IT people behind and going after line of business users. They introduced this subscription model kind of enterprises started going rogue in the beginning, where they said, okay, IT can do whatever they want. I'm going to just go and deploy Salesforce with my department's budget. Of course, it very soon became a landscape nightmare to integrate all of these things. Now, between 2000 and 2023, we still have significant number of customers who are sitting on on-premise software. So when the technology has been there, the trust has been there, the business model has been there, adoption has been super slow. So the question is, when we take from here to the next inflection point, and hopefully that's not a decade, what is the role of AI going to be in terms of ERP adoption, right? And how are we going to infuse? I think one thing is clear, that for most customers who are going to sit on on-premise environments, unfortunately, they're not going to be able to get all these benefits because the kind of compute you need simply not humanly possible or technically possible to deploy that in on-prem environments. So let's look at what are the things that we have found. So obviously, Microsoft is not doing this sitting alone in the lab. There's massive work that has been happening with a lot of customers to build these copilots, to test them out for all principles of security, reliability, privacy, data accuracy, or even, you all have heard of hallucinations. So we've also seen hallucinations. How do you do the grounding of those hallucinations, etc.? What we learned really is that things that people really are looking for is it being super adaptive, because nobody wants rigidity. And there's a reason for it, right? So especially for new age workers who are entering the workforce, they think of software as something that they hire to do the job versus the software telling you how to do your job. And that's a massive difference in this whole relationship, right? So they're not willing to kind of take the cognitive load. They want to give the cognitive load to the software, which probably is the right reason why software was developed in the first place. It's changed. And the other aspect is this whole autonomous, like guide me through the services and let me intervene when I need to. Reality is we are very far away from that state of autonomous, but that's the intent, right? So when we think about it from a Microsoft perspective, how do you really bring this out in terms of portfolio? So we are really starting with very, very simple things. That we call it the low stakes skills to higher stakes skills. And the low stakes skills are very simple, right? You get into your Dynamics environment, you ask, okay, how do I create a purchase order? Because the reality is a lot of customers who switch from on-premise to cloud, they spend between 22 to 40% of their implementation cost on the training long term. The other aspect that is happening is also in a lot of job functions, there's contingent worker. So which means that each time you bring somebody, you need to train these people. So there's a loss of value, loss of time. So the question is, how can Copilot go and fix that? The other thing that we've seen is significant portion of our support tickets are really about people not either having the time to read documentation or just being too lazy, right? I would say lazy is also, it's a different generation, right? So people want to consume information in 2 to 3 seconds. Now, for us to create TikTok videos at scale would be very hard. So probably the answer is, you use a Copilot, ask a question, get your answer, move on, right? So those are the category of use cases that we've released right now. The next set of use cases are really focused on how do you empower users, right? So how do you give them data where they want? If you're sitting in a sales order, you want to do an ATP check, or you want to create a project plan, so you don't want to start from the beginning. How do you leverage templates? How do you look at past patterns? And how can Copilot help you with that? The third category is the set of use cases that we have released is more around identifying outliers. So the beauty is that you can present people with a lot of data, but if they are not really very well versed with that space, it will not make a difference. Now, Copilot can actually tell you that, hey, these are the outliers that I see based on your past business or past performance. It also tells you what is the downstream impact, if any, of these outliers. And at the same time, over times, it learns your patterns and tells you what are the best decisions. Now, the reality is that all of this has been there, right? You could achieve all of this in a very, very roundabout way by hiring, probably data scientists, machine learning specialists, and all of that. But it was not really available for a normal user, and that's the difference that generative AI is able to bring. And the last state, which I call the state of nirvana, I would say we are far from there in most cases, where it is kind of exception-based steering logic. I think it would take a lot to get there in some scenarios. Probably you could get there, but the question is, do you want to release capabilities like this? Because you also take a lot of bonus as a software vendor, and I'm going to guarantee you that outcome. I think we are not yet there. So that's the state of investments that we are making. In terms of portfolio, I talked about in the past, we really brought all the different pieces together because at the end of the day, they are built on the same product platform. For us, the bigger advantage is also the fact that we get a lot of things for free from Microsoft. So it's not that each team has to go and build stuff on their own. Our pivot is a lot on end-to-end business processes. So, kind of move away from just, of course, feature functions and products are important, but not limited to that. Really think end-to-end business process. We are building this whole analytical models around procure to pay, order to cash, plan to produce, etc. And at the same time, making these models very extensible because the likelihood of a customer having only Dynamics in their environment is very low. If not anything, they'll have lots of Excels. So the question is, how do you bring all of that extensibility? And through that, we are releasing between December and February capabilities around, financial planning and analytics, extended planning analytics. We are releasing also business performance analytics, which is really your data analytics and insights. So it is bringing a lot of external information also. We're able to achieve all of this because there's Dataverse and Fabric, which allows us through data pipeline to bring external sources of information map to the data models that we are providing. And last but not least, we'll also be bringing the whole what we have in process insights, process mining into the product. So the beauty of this approach really is that on one hand, as a customer, you can decide what you adopt. But at the same time, when you go for the suite, you get everything, right? So you don't have to buy analytics separately and process mining separately. This is one suite. You buy it based on the pricing that we have. And then you have the optionality to pick and choose what you do. So, which I think is pretty powerful. Okay, I can skip this. I was supposed to present it like that. Just a quick one on in terms of certain other differentiations that I want to talk about is also the whole story of ISV solutions. We will never ever build everything for everybody. This simply is not possible in a SaaS world. But at the same time, we also are cognizant that we cannot just give a standard software to customers and say, hey, here it is, go figure. Right? So for us, the important thing is to grow this, what we call as developer extensibility points. So people who are conversant with how Dynamics portfolio is built. We continuously provide a lot of extensibility points, which allows our customers, partners to build on that. This is a very non-disruptive way. So that next time you get an upgrade, you don't overwrite things that partners and customers have built, which I think is a huge differentiator coming to when you compare between other SaaS players. The other side of this whole extensibility is the ability to use Power Platform in conjunction with Dynamics. We've seen in the past people building things on Power Platform, but not really connecting to the core Dynamics. Now we're pushing more and more of that scenarios and use cases. You also see that a lot of our portfolio is kind of getting pushed towards Dataverse. to enhance, not to kind of duplicate. Some places we have duplications, but that those are the things that need to be rationalized. So that's kind of where we are bringing things together. We look at the composability piece of it. I think the important thing is to understand that while this is highly integrated, one price point, it allows customers to pick and choose. It also allows customers to have a combination. There's a lot of customers who use supply chain from us, but are using, for example, finance from SAP, or for that matter, other way around. Uh, Commerce and project operations customers use just these elements, and they have Oracle, SAP in their landscapes, which is fine with us as long as it works. The other aspect is, and this is something that we're seeing a lot of adoption right now, large companies who are stuck in on-premise blueprints of Oracle, SAP for 20 years ago, and their ability to change these or build new templates it's just super time consuming. If you look at customers in Germany, I know customers who just finished their ECC implementation, but they have made acquisitions and now they don't want to go and do an ECC implementation there. So for them, it is good to move to a new template, and this is where companies are leveraging Dynamics, either for the subsidiaries, new businesses. Like if you look at Nestle Waters is a good example. Nestle is branching out into a lot of new businesses, and they don't want to go to the old template. So here they find Dynamics to be a good use case to use. And last but not least is this what I call division-specific plays. Again, large companies, if they want to do their aftermarket, spare parts, asset management, distribution business, project operations is a great example of that as well. You can basically have any ERP in place and use the product to run this. So behind these use cases is where our investment is also pivoted on, right? So this is how market consumes us, and this is how we drive our investments. So very quickly, talking about how the guiding principles of these copilots are going to be in the product. I talked about this whole low stake to high stake. So the other important thing to understand, and this is going to be very true for most of Microsoft portfolios, that we are not looking at Copilot as a separate thing. This is really something in your product. So there is not going to be a Salesforce like, you have a Einstein and an intelligent CRM and a stupid CRM. You basically have one ERP and CRM, and it comes with basically intelligence. So that's going to also govern how we commercialize things. The third aspect is this whole AI first experience, which is super hard because today we have UIs, people do things on the UIs. So far, the focus has always been how do I improve this UI, right? But when you start thinking with the lens of AI first experience, then probably that old UI doesn't even hold good in the current environment. So for us to kind of completely reimagine interaction with software, it's going to be a journey, but this is where we have started. And I can tell you it is very hard for a normal person who has been playing around with, whether project management, portfolio management, or, sales orders. We've been doing things like this since last 40 years. You have a form, you have data, boom. And now you start thinking about, okay, now there is some magic behind it, and I'm supposed to ask questions and draw reports in a certain way. Yes, this will be, I would say, make or break for a lot of software vendors. And I think the most important cornerstone really is around responsible AI. I think Microsoft is investing a lot in this. So we have very, very rigorous processes in place, which sometimes are very frustrating for engineers before we can release capabilities. So there is a lot, of course, around privacy, security, stability. But more than that, the kind of responses it's generating. It might be sitting on your data, right? But it still has the capability to give you complete garbage responses if it's not grounded well. So that's why it takes a lot of time. We tend to release things in private preview, but between private preview and GA, Sometimes things take a very long time. Sometimes things have been canceled because they don't reach that state. Um, yeah, I have a video which I'm going to play because I just want to share a little bit of, give you a feel of what's happening. So this, when we talk about this whole conversational health, we are not talking about just documentation, right? This is health while you're working with the system. So the next one, really, I hope the audio is captured well. Let's see if this plays. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm connected to it.
An unexpected surge in demand for audio devices leads to an immediate response from demand planning. Purchase orders are dispatched automatically to vendors. Many confirm swiftly, but some vendors can't meet their commitments. The updated procurement plan is already in motion. This is where Microsoft Copilot and Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management steps in. With Copilot's guidance, the user accesses the confirmed purchase orders workspace to evaluate the current status. The system then highlights potential vendor modifications and their downstream impact. From reallocating resources to negotiating with alternative vendors, Copilot provides actionable solutions. Searching for alternatives is made easy. With just a click, the user gets suggestions. For example, in this case, a standard crossover. Multiple alternatives pop up. Our purchaser is now empowered to make informed decisions swiftly. Want to know how to apply these alternatives in your production order? Copilot breaks it down step by step, making the process transparent and straightforward, and it can even execute these steps for the user. With this latest innovation in Dynamics 365, supply chain teams are empowered with conversational help to find the next best action while in the flow of work, increasing their productivity, collaboration, and performance.
So let me just kind of just break this down for you because there's a lot of things packaged here. Um, the reality is we're working with a customer who has 85,000 changes every week in their confirmed purchase orders, right? So they get the POs from their suppliers, but during the time of delivery, there's about 85,000 changes. And today they have in Vietnam a kind of a service center where there are 300 people whose job is every day to look at all these changes, analyze the impact, confirm, approve, or go back to the supplier, right? So the co-pilot that we did with this customer in the previous state was really look at all these changes and see how many of these changes to confirmed orders actually had a downstream impact. We figured in some weeks, almost 70,000 of the changes had zero impact, which means it didn't impact production, it didn't impact sales orders, nothing, right? But still, the person had to look at everything. So with the Copilot, you can say, okay, these 70,000 have zero downstream impacts. You can take all of them, click, and then it shows you what are the other downstream impact that you're having either in production or your sales order for the certain changes. That you can order by saying, okay, which is the most immediate one, or you can filter by category or customers, etc. And then it saves massive amount of time. The whole integration of all these changes that you have in the system with Outlook and Teams, picking the context, ability to formulate these emails and send it sounds very easy, but it is quite a lot of work saved, quite a lot of time saved for people. And the reality is that when we were interviewing these people from the service center, none of them said that they woke up every morning and came very energized to sit and look at all these. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to take, approve changes and confirm purchase orders. So this was quite a big shift that happened. Of course, we have combined that also with other scenarios where you look at in a classic environment, you do the sales order, you do the ADP check. We can do a lot of these things in real time, right? Instead of running through these processes. The other thing I want to say is all of this was possible today also. You can do all of this without Copilot because companies run, they do their processes. The question is the amount of time and people that is spent on this. So it is really that pivoting back to productivity and Oops. If you were to look at it like, from a broader Microsoft perspective, and I think we are really lucky that we have this situation that we don't look at business applications in isolation, right? It is really the orchestration of your entire office tools and technologies, the low-code environment, so our Power Platform, and business applications. So it's really the coming together of these three elements, of course, backed by the entire platform, Azure OpenAI service, which obviously is the most critical thing here. This makes the difference. So for us, the difference between us and other vendors really is that if you look at Amazon and Google, great platforms, but no business applications. You look at Salesforce, ERP vendors like SAP or Oracle, great applications, but no productivity tools or low code environment. Or, of course, now they are all moving to Azure, so maybe they get some advantage. So this is a huge win, and it is really upon us to now fail with all of this in our pocket, right? So that's kind of the broad set. If I spend a few minutes now, I don't know, Peter, how I'm doing time-wise. Am I bad? Good? Up to 25 minutes, if you like. Okay. I will be accelerating. So if we look at what we are doing in project operations very specifically, there's a lot of scenarios that have been evaluated, right? So a couple of things are this producing of status reports. So today it's very static reports. You have to construct all of this. With Copilot, you can basically ask based on the data that is sitting in the system to prepare these status reports. The second thing is, project plans for new opportunities. Of course, this is a lot of it's based on templates, previous data that you have in systems, so it can make these suggestions. The idea is that it cuts down your time instead of starting everything from scratch. Then you have this risk and mitigation plan. So again, this is simply leveraging the entire connectivity of data chains, and basically saying, okay, you have a risk here and there because either you don't have the right resources, you don't have, in non-stop cases, either you don't have things available in time, payment issues. So it tells you all of that. And where possible, it gives you mitigation plans. And the last thing is, of course, as you all know this better than I, the entire navigation and general assistance, it can be super overwhelming for people who are not used to these environments. So those are some of the use cases that are being currently worked on from the project operations team. We've released this, I think, the project plan topic, creating project plans in private preview since just before Ignite. So this is out there. Probably want to spend just a minute on this in terms of how we are doing this, because it's also important to understand nobody's dreaming this up. We obviously are looking at end-to-end business processes, but we are also looking at roles, right? So if you look at the project operations, you have lots of roles, right? Each role, we then look at, okay, what is the job that has to be done by this person? And then we look at certain themes across these jobs, reporting, approvals, creating status. There are certain themes which cuts across every little job. Like we'd be surprised, but approvals is a crazy amount of theme that cuts across, from a normal employee to managers. So based on that, what we do is we create this reusable domain-aware Copilot library. So what is important to understand is that we are not creating the skills for each and everything every time we encounter something. Simple thing like dialogue with data. You want to talk to your data. It's one skill, but then it is augmented by domain-specific capabilities, and then you release it for everyone, right? So not just for ERP, also for CRM. So that's the reusable aspect which helps us go faster, because if each team was developing their own Copilot, it take 100 years. And then what we are seeing, like we started with source to pay, which is a very commonly used end-to-end scenario, that when we take these jobs to be done and put a lot of Copilots in here, not everything is complete, but there is certain modeling behind that. You will see that process changes a lot. So a lot of these human interventions that happen in the process today kind of disappear. We are not yet there. Within source to pay, we are looking very narrowly into procure to pay as a starting point. And when you flip to the other sides on AP automations or accounts payable automation or collections and all of this, the result is pretty amazing, but it's still at the lab stage. So I guess we have to wait some more time. But this is the approach that we are taking in terms of how we are developing this. So this is not some black box magic happening. So, of course, I talked about this slide should have been before, but sorry about that. That's, kind of the roles that we have today. So we are looking at each and every role. What are these roles doing and how can we help these roles? In terms of, our portfolio, very quick track. I think this is something that is probably known to everybody in this room. So I'm not really going to present this, across deal management, billing, finance, procurement. A lot of our focus so far has been, of course, on the professional services industry and the ACE, so architecture, engineering, construction. We are going to be pivoting a lot more towards stock items as well, so project-based manufacturing, because we see a lot of competition there. Our competitors get through project-based manufacturing and then expand to the broader ERP scope. So that's something that we're going to be investing in. I'll talk about that in a second. In terms of, the shared ecosystem piece, right? This is kind of a different representation of the same story I said earlier from a context of project operations, right? So this is like you have the entire project lifecycle, but at each stage, you are leveraging things that Microsoft's broader portfolio provides you, right? Whether it is your integration with field service, integration with our office tools, the whole CPQ, which is largely a ISV play, but also integration with our broader Dynamics portfolio. So this principle applies to each and every product and application that we build. In terms of investment themes, so there are a lot of investment themes. I just try to capture at the highest level what are these themes where we are going to be investing. So, we do this roadmap, which is like a 6-month roadmap, right? It's that thing that we communicate with confidence. Basically, I've now started bringing my teams to deliver slightly long-termish view of the investment. Which means that if a customer is making a relationship with Microsoft and saying that, hey, I want to buy Dynamics, I would think it is super hard to make that decision based on a 6-month roadmap and some old features. Typically, customers would also like to know what's that landing in the next 18, 24, 36 months. We're not there at 5-year roadmaps, but we looked at, okay, what are the broad things that we will invest in? Of course, we put it confidential. We say this is subject to change because a lot of things will change. We don't know what impact Copilot will have in 1 year. Maybe some things are not needed. I think there's something around user experience here, or probably not. Maybe that changes, but these are the broad themes that we are going to be investing in at the highest level. Like I said, completion of the professional services scope is one thing. We have a lot of challenges in certain industries because of the limitations that web-based project has around number of resources, how many tasks you can assign, etc. So those are things that are being worked on in partnership with different teams because we have our F&O piece, we have our DataWorks piece, and then we rely also on the central projects teams, right? So it's not contained, it's really bringing a lot of things together. So I think I have a lot of respect for Rupa in terms of how she brings all these different worlds together and still smiles every day. So that's broad themes. If I were to look at stuff that have been released, I think the 2023 Wave 2 is what we've seen in terms of budgeting, forecasting. If you haven't seen the expense app on the mobile. This is pretty cool. It's been released as well, where we are focusing in terms of wave one, so which is basically the April landing, really is around the advanced contracting models, UI enhancements and performance improvements. Always, we are looking really at this NSAT improvements in two dimensions. So one is, things that we know are bad in the product from a perspective of experience, but we are also looking very actively at, so this is something new that I have introduced. I experimented with this in supply chain, that we take these idea portals topics, and every semester we take the top 10 and bring it into backlogs. Because sometimes they just sit in the ideas portal and nothing happens. So we are actively incentivizing people to prioritize those topics. Of course, they have to sometimes make sense, because there are a lot of things which are great ideas, but they don't make sense in the product. One of the copilots that you will see land in GA is this whole copilot for project team members. So it's really productivity oriented, and of course, enhancements on the pricing engine. In terms of the vision, and this is really, I would say, take it with a pinch of salt, because there is a lot of things that is involved. So what do I mean by that? Today we imagine a lot of things that are happening or going to happen with the technology that we have in Copilot. In 3 months later, probably those things are not needed, because the Copilot itself does it for you. So we've obviously created certain views in terms of, when it comes to proposal generation using generative AI. So in different stages. So whether it is sales, planning, resource management, execution, and team member experiences, and also invoicing, which also goes closer to the finance side of our house. So these are certain areas. If I were to double click on what this really is, we will just have some screenshots. So in terms of suggesting resources, it can tell you based on project, it does historical mapping. Okay, what is it that potentially a resource that you may need? It tells you that, okay, if the skill, for example, here is based on robotics, arms installation, network installation, it picks people who have certain amount of experience with that. It gives them a score based on the match, and then you can make a decision whether you want to start this person or not, right? So these are, the other thing is, this is something that I would love, time entry using natural language, where you basically talk to the copilot and you tell the copilot to, fill your timesheets. It can show you that visually as a Gantt chart. It can also, show you what are the descriptions of these different work that you have done. It also tells you what are the missing timesheets or incomplete timesheets from different members. And then it can, at one goal, go and send all this information to the people, right? So everything works today. All of this can be done today, but this is a much easier way of doing it, much faster way of doing it. So this is this email that it sends reminders to people. You don't have to annoy them by sending emails. This is all done through Copilot. The other thing is expense entry using natural language, which is something which probably all of us who travel a lot would love. So basically what it does is, this is your expense entry. If you're using the Dynamics Expense Management, it can basically scan. So the important thing is that when you are getting into this world of Copilot, you're opening your business email and Teams, right? So which means that it is reading your emails. It is, when I say reading, it's scanning. It is looking for patterns in your emails, for example, right? It is looking for patterns in your chats. It is finding relationships, who you work with, and all that. So basically, it's the same principle. It says, okay, these are the things which are not attached for an expense perspective. goes to the email, shows you that, hey, this looks like a flight ticket, which probably happened during your project duration. Do you want me to attach this to your expense? You can say yes or no, because it could be private, it could be whatever. It also says that you can actively go and say that, hey, I found this mail. You add this one to my expense report. It allows you to do that as well. And then, it attaches everything. It also tells you that I have made changes. There are certain policy guidelines, right? So it tells you that XYZ is not meeting your policy guidelines of the company. You can drill down and figure out what you violate and what you need to do that about that. And then it tells you that, okay, certain expenses need breakdown. Like if you are in Germany, if you go to a hotel, you have to do crazy things, break your breakfast, tax, I don't know. I need a Copilot for that because so this Copilot is going to solve. So these are just some of the examples of things that we are doing. There is going to be a lot of tech talks and sessions, not TikTok, tech talks, and sessions around these things. So that's what I pretty much wanted to share in my presentation. Yeah, without going, extremely deep into project operations. This is the broad portfolio of investments. And if there are any questions that I can answer or at least take home with, I'd love to.
Thank you, Sameer. Thank you so much for bringing all these interesting insights. I see that there is a lot of new every day coming up about AI Copilot, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of open doors. So looking forward to all the updates and everything that is coming the next year. Then let's see if we have some questions in the chat. At the moment, I don't see any, but in case you have any questions, please also raise your hand and we can unmute you.
Or if something in the room.
Or maybe from the room as well, of course. Yeah.
You guys are not allowed to ask questions.
So you mentioned also using the Copilot in basically the user trainings. Are there any plans to have the Copilot basically not trained on just the data in the system, but also trained on user behavior? Basically monitoring the way that the users are currently using the tool. I would say like mouse movements, mouse input, how we're following the process, and then basically giving suggestions to the user, like you're using the tool this way, but how about you do this instead?
Yeah, so today we have this process advisor and the process recorder, which is part of the Power Automation. Of course, it doesn't go to your mouse. It can, but probably doesn't go to your mouse. But it really tells the process recorder records everything that you do, right? So you give the permissions. There's a process viewer. There's a recorder. Right? It tells about the behavior of how you do things. The next step is that you want to improve things. It is not about today, we don't tell the user how you should be doing. It is more geared towards how do you change the process in the systems so that people work different. So how do you identify inefficiencies in the system? And then you design it in such a way that people are more efficient versus trying to change behaviors in that sense. So this is something that we already have. Also, for example, we recently worked with a customer in Belgium, who have a warehouse implemented a long time ago. So through this whole process advisor and process viewer, they could see what are these web zones inside the warehouse where a lot of people are suddenly meeting, and it's creating confusion. It is good if it is people, but they have now deployed a lot of these automated guided vehicles and robotics, which always come to these web zone and then they get input down. Right? And you would think it's a very obvious thing to know, but they actually had to deploy the whole process, the recorder and process viewer to see what's happening. I also want to add that, in this whole training data, we call it right now, we don't have an official name for it. It's called Doc Q&A. This was released at Ignite. Right now, we are focusing on data which is sitting in our system. The idea, of course, is to extend this to partner data or MVPs, etc., because there's so much goodness out there. The limitation is that who takes the liability, right? So today we can take liability about accuracy and correctness of data that is sitting with us. Maybe there will be ways where the customer has to accept that, okay, I allow data from proMX, for example, or documentation or MVPs, information from forums like XYZ. So there is a lot of, I would say, gray areas in some sense where ultimately we don't want to just release something and then the customer figures out, right? It has to be completely controlled. So possibilities are many. My question is what do you like? If that makes sense. Yeah.
All right.
We
I
have
see
one
another
more.
question. Yes, I see another question in the room.
Hi. First of all, thank you. That was quite interesting. I got a question regarding language because I could imagine a lot of use cases in terms of checking data quality. For example, I'm coming from a company, we are also a software provider and a consulting company in the field service management area. And for example, one topic which is consuming quite a lot of time in our case is checking time entries if they are written in a way which, but more the kind of words that our insights are using in terms of, okay, you can't write that in that way on a customer invoice. And for example, with open AI, I'm feeling like English is still the better language to use AI tools, but we are working in the DACH region, and so basically we're only running German for our customers. Is this still a topic, or what, for example, in use case where I'm saying, okay, get me every time entry where you feel like I can write that in this way for a customer, would that be a possible use case?
It's actually possible already today.
Okay, also in German?
In any language. Not in Japanese. I don't know when we are. German, absolutely. So, there is a staging, right? So obviously most of these, like all our use cases between in June, they were only in US.
Okay.
But that was not because of language, that was because of certain regulatory requirements in different areas. Right? So now those June use cases have been released in Europe already.
Okay.
And actually, I feel that ChatGPT has pretty amazing German skills. I used to use Google Translate to write to the Biancers. Now I use ChatGPT, this day and night difference.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I feel like, for example, a few weeks ago, I wanted ChatGPT to replace a part I was coding, and I dropped it in German. It answered in English, and it was quite a hassle to get it into German. I don't know why, but
okay, because you have maybe the problem.
But I got the time entries or similar tasks checked.
proMX,
Okay, great.
Yes.
Super. Thank you so much, Sameer, for covering that one as well. And I see that we have a question from Kuldeep Gupta in the chat.
Hi, Sameer. Let me turn on my camera as well. So nice to meet you. I have a very small customer. Question. So we talk a lot to a lot of customers here, and I think one interesting thing that everyone points to us it is about the agile methodology. That is, we are all looking forward to it. Do you have anything planned in the roadmap to bring that up? Because what we now have to push them out is do an integration with either DevOps or Jira as a tool. I think if this is the piece that can fill in the gap, we don't have to push this integration piece anymore further.
Well, I mean, Kuldeep, I can take this back. This is not an active roadmap that I see. You know how our roadmap works better than I do. It's a function of how much usage can we drive, right? How many customers are asking for it? Is it a 20% or 80% category? So I would say, this is something that I can take back to Rupa and come back to you guys.
Yeah, at least for the
It's not an active
It's not in the active plan. Fine, I got it. Because there are a lot of pre-sales presentation that are going on with a lot of Indian customers here as well in the enterprise segment. And these enterprise segment people do a lot of waterfall combined with agile and stuff like that. So we are well versed with the waterfall part of it. But when it comes to agile, we have to do some manipulations here and there in terms of integration and sell it out. But I got my answer. Thank you so much.
Take this back. Okay.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, Sameer.
Yes,
Super.
So in
And-
regards, sorry.
Yes.
You mentioned that potential identification of resources for specific projects. What is a bit more specific timeline? So when is that to be expected? That's the one thing. And is it possible to get a few more details or a few more insights on what exactly, what are the variables or what are the parameters that are being taken to choose the right resources for a specific project?
So this is a good question. So I'll first answer the second question. In terms of, ability to get details, I would say, depending on customer partner willingness, there's also possibility to really join this kind of coordination work. That happens also to give insights because we creating focus groups around each of these scenarios, right? So this is not something that happens inside the lab. This also requires a lot of real customers and data to work on. So the current variables that are really being considered are, if you have a task, for example, so this example that I showed, what is the requirement, experience, what does the task entail? So you basically go for certain keywords analysis, right? So you could also argue that it is as good as the data that is maintained for this resource, right? So you see on LinkedIn, some people hashtag product management, even if they have never done product management in their life, because they want to be picked by the recruiters who are looking for. So that sheet is there, but the override of that sheet is that it actually also looks at what is your true experience in this space. And based on that, it gives you a scoring, right? So you saw that 4 in the page. So if you claim to have done lifetime of work as a network engineer, but you have probably done 10 hours of that work, you have those 4. What will be integrated into this is also certificate information, etc. So you know what kind of certification you have. So the first question is a tough one. So timeline. Why do I say a tough one? A lot of things are ready, but they cannot be shipped because they need to meet the responsible AI guidelines. They need to meet. So we have new product standards in the company, and it takes time because this is, remember, new for Microsoft, new for all of us. It's a completely separate team which does all these checks. But we are targeting April as a time frame to release a lot of new Copilots. In supply chain and finance, I would say we have more certainty of releasing because the teams were a bit faster. In project operations, I don't want to give a date right now. I don't want to confirm it. Let's put it this way.
Okay, good.
So the 4 that I showed are the ones that are active.
You mentioned those focus groups. How is it possible to get connected to those?
So this is possible through 2 channels. So we have something called these Yammer. So are you an existing customer or? Oh, okay. Yeah, you are an existing customer. So I can basically ask you or somebody from our team to just invite you. Yeah. So these focus groups are a group of customers, partners, MVPs, and sometimes independent consultants. And then this is where Microsoft exposes what are they working on, show the approaches. And then there are customers who decide to participate in a private review. I mean, the process if you're using the product. Of course, the process for this is slightly different. Because if you are willing to take the environment and put it in your, the sandbox in your environment, to test with your data and stuff like that, you have also, sign up for something.
That's a process we need to verify inside anyway. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, for me, it would be interesting on how to be, or what are the connects that we can test.
Rupa's team needs to reach out to you and make it happen. This is
Perfect.
yeah, very, very straightforward.
That's good. Thanks.
Yes, Daniel.
And also on the roadmap, when are all these features available for the self-hosted in the next environments?
On-premise.
So self-hosted.
Okay. It depends really on the geos. So the idea, of course, is that in places, in environments where it is, geo available, it should be available right away. But I don't know the real answer. So we can check this one as well. I mean, the challenge is that right now, with the exception of the project manager assistant, Copilot, we have not formed timeline for any of the other Copilots on project operations. So the wave one, we will release this, people who work with the tool, that Copilot. And our hope is that when that passes, a lot of these product standards, several other can be simply attached to it.
I just mentioned the modern expense for the finance that's only available for sandbox environments currently and not
Yes.
self-hosted.
Yes. So, okay, so you mean public preview is yes. In fact, most of these things are available in public preview or private preview today.
From my perspective, it's 5 minutes out of the 12. If you have questions, then you have chances in the round tables. We have a network lunch prepared. We can go further and deeper into some of these interesting subjects later. Sameer, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sameer, for the presentation and also answering the questions. I believe that we have still a little bit of time with you. And for everyone who is visiting us online, please feel free to contact us or Sameer, and we will be happy to cover your questions. And a quick reminder about our sessions for tomorrow. We still have two to cover tomorrow at the same time. We will be talking about project operations in connections with the customer engagement modules, specifically for the professional services industry. And in the evening, at 4 p.m., we'll be talking about BizApps, Power Platform, and Project Portfolio Management Solution developed by proMX. And now, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. Thank you once more, Sameer, and looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.